Requiem for a Dream came out in the year 2000, a year when most movies still pretended addiction was a subplot. This one didn't. It made addiction the setting, the villain, and the final shot. 4 characters spiral toward collapse, each chasing a different dream. Fame, love, escape, success, it promises all of them. Then it strips everything away. Number 1, the Tappy Tibbins infomercial has a hidden third rule that says, no orgasms. In the movie, you only hear him shout about red meat and refined sugar, and he does it with the kind of energy you would expect from someone selling salvation to strangers at 2 in the morning. But that third rule? It is not spoken out loud, not once. You only find it if you explore the Requiem for a Dream DVD like it is some forgotten artifact from the early 2000s. If you click twice on the chapter menu and press enter, you get a secret version of the infomercial that shows the full list. The third step, no orgasms, is listed right at the end. Areronowski never put it in the main cut because it does not need to be heard to be felt. Everything in the Tappy Tibbins segments is about control, about stripping away pleasure and selling suffering as progress. He is not there to motivate. He is there to preach restraint until nothing joyful remains. Tappy is not in the book. Areronowski created him for the film, and through him he mocked the culture that tells people their worth is something they have to earn by starving. The red dress, the diet pills, the talk show fantasy, it all feeds into that idea. Sara is told she will be happy when she is smaller, cleaner, quieter, but what she is really being told is that happiness lives on the other side of giving everything up. No orgasms is not a punchline, it is the core of that lie, and the fact that it is hidden on the DVD says even more. You are not supposed to notice it right away. You are supposed to live in that discomfort even when you cannot name it. Number 2, Darren Weighins was accidentally hit in the head with a prop gun during filming. The scene being shot was chaotic by design, a moment between Harry and Tyrone where tension boils over and control breaks down. The camera shakes, the voices rise, and in the middle of all that stage disorder, something real happened. The prop gun, passed back and forth in the scene like a toy, ended up hitting Weighins hard enough that it left a mark. It was not planned, and it was not added later to build realism. But it ended up on film. There is a line in that scene where one of the characters shouts that someone's going to get hurt, and the timing is eerie because it turned out to be true. On most sets, something like that would have meant a cut, a reset, maybe even a rewrite, but Areronowski kept it in, not because it was sensational, but because it matched what the scene was already doing. These characters are not safe, not from each other, not from themselves. The hit, the stumble, the flicker of confusion on Weighins' face, all of it underscored the thin line between acting and actual consequence. What matters is how close the film allows its actors to get to the edge. Not for show, not for pain, but because in a story about people unraveling, the performances need to feel like they could fall apart at any second. In that moment, they did. Number 3, Jared Leto and Darren Weighins abstained from sugar and sex for 30 days. Darren Areronowski gave this direction before filming began, not for marketing or method acting cred, but to create something more grounded than performance. The film does not show addiction as a spectacle, it shows it as craving, as absence, as need that leaks into everything. Sugar and sex are not just indulgences, they are part of the body's wiring, linked to survival and pleasure. By cutting them off, Leto and Weighins were asked to live inside a space where want becomes constant. Jared Leto, who plays Harry, took the process further, losing nearly 30 pounds and spending time in Brooklyn with real heroin users. He watched how they spoke, how they sat, how they breathed when they were waiting for the next high. Darren Weighins, playing Tyrone, stayed in that space too, letting the tension settle in. The goal was not to make acting harder, it was to make the character's internal states visible on the surface. The twitch in a hand, the sag in a posture, the 1,000-yard stare that holds just a few seconds too long. These are not rehearsed gestures. They are the body's answer to denial. When craving becomes the only thing that feels real, everything else gets dim. That is what the film tried to show, not through words but through presence. Number 4. Real heroin addicts were cast as extras during production. In one of the film's most haunting sequences, the camera drifts through a supermarket where heroin is sold like it is produce, and standing in the background are people who were not pretending. Darren Areronowski made a deliberate choice to cast real heroin users from Brooklyn as extras in several scenes, including this one. These were not professionals rehearsing lines or mimicking behavior. They were people living the reality the film was trying to portray. They were directed and filmed with the same care given to the main cast, but their presence brought a weight that could not be scripted. Some accounts from the set claim that real drugs were being injected off camera, not as part of the production but as part of the reality these individuals carried with them. That detail, whether true or exaggerated, speaks to the level of closeness the film maintained with the world it was depicting. Areronowski did not insert their presence for shock or spectacle. He wanted to make something that confronted audiences with a version of addiction that did not blink or cut away. The scene lands with a discomfort that stays, not because of violence or visual extremes, but because for a moment the movie stops being a story and starts resembling something else, something unfiltered, something already happening. Number 5. Jennifer Connelly prepared for her role by spending time with addicts and attending recovery meetings. To play Marion Silver in Requiem for a Dream, she did not rely on imagination or guesswork. She moved into an apartment that resembled the one her character lived in, choosing to sit in the same kind of silence Marion would have heard day after day. She painted, designed clothes, and listened to music that felt like it belonged in Marion's world. But more than that, she went out and met people who were living through what her character would eventually face. She talked with addicts, heard their stories, and saw the effects up close. She even went to Narcotics Anonymous meetings with a recovering friend, not to act like she understood, but to listen and witness. That immersion shaped everything about her performance. When she starts to slip, it is not a generic portrayal of someone falling apart. There is a quiet panic in her face that feels pulled from something real. The way she starts to trade pieces of herself. How the apartment shifts from a place of dreams to a place of survival, none of that feels like fiction, it feels like memory. That level of preparation made Marion's story hurt more because it did not feel like acting. It felt like someone telling the truth. Number 6. The final phone call between Harry and Marion was not rehearsed or tightly scripted. Areronowski placed Jared Leto and Jennifer Connelly in connected sets, each with a live phone line, and rolled the cameras. What you hear in that scene is not actors performing a written exchange, but two people reacting in real time to each other's fear and silence. The characters have already begun to unravel, and the call is not a climax, it's a collapse. Because they weren't reading lines. Neither of them knew exactly how the other would sound. There were pauses, stutters, hesitations that came from confusion rather than direction. Areronowski recorded them as they were, letting the tension hang between the words. This choice gave the scene its broken, unscripted texture. You can hear how hard Harry is trying to sound okay. You can feel Marion slipping into a silence that says more than any scripted monologue ever could. It was not clean, and that was the point. Number 7. The refrigerator that attacks Sara Goldfarb is not a hallucination built for spectacle. It is a manifestation of something slower, quieter, and more painful. She is not terrified because the fridge is growling at her. She is terrified because she no longer knows what is real. That moment arrives after weeks of Sara swallowing pills, starving herself, and watching reruns of a TV show she believes will one day call her. Her reality begins to split, and the kitchen, the last ordinary part of her life, turns on her. It is not supposed to move, it is not supposed to scream, and yet it does. What makes the scene disturbing is not just the effects or the lighting, it's the knowledge that this happens slowly, and that by the time Sara sees the fridge coming toward her, it is already too late. The fear doesn't come from the object, it comes from the absence of anything to hold on to. That is what makes it land so hard. Number 8. The final montage of Requiem for a Dream is one of the most emotionally crushing endings in modern film. Each of the 4 main characters is shown lying alone in a fetal position, a visual that does not just imply defeat, it confirms it. These are not just exhausted people, they are people who have been reduced to something smaller, something broken, something trying to survive what they thought they could control. It is not a coincidence that the fetal position resembles both death and birth. These characters are not just regressing, they are being unmade by the choices that led them here. Harry is missing an arm. Marion is clutching money earned from something she cannot speak about. Tyrone is buried in a prison bed, haunted by memories of his mother. Sara is locked in a hospital, eyes wide and absent, believing she will be on television. None of them speak in these final moments, because there is nothing left to say. The dreams are gone, and only the wreckage remains. Number 9. Addiction in this film is not about substances alone. Heroin is only one form of hunger explored. Each character is chasing a different promise of transformation, and that's where the story cuts deeper. Marion believes her future lies in creative independence, but what she's really chasing is validation and control. Harry wants to provide for Marion, but his addiction is less about drugs and more about escape from failure, from responsibility, from himself. Tyrone's high is entangled with memories of safety, tied to a longing for maternal warmth he never stopped needing. And Sara, most heartbreakingly, is not chasing a pill, but a feeling, the belief that she matters, that she can be seen and loved. Her addiction is to an image on a screen, a dream sold by commercials and game shows, where salvation comes in the form of applause and a red dress. The film shows that addiction is not limited to needles and pills. It is woven into hope, identity, and the quiet ache to be accepted. Number 10. Ellen Burstyn's physical transformation for Sara Goldfarb was not created digitally or enhanced in post-production. It was the result of a daily routine that pushed the limits of time, comfort, and endurance. For several hours each morning, Burstyn sat through complex makeup and prosthetic applications, including 4 different custom neck pieces that showed Sara's progression from hopeful to completely broken. She also wore 2 different fat suits, one to represent her before the amphetamines, and one after her weight began to plummet. Alongside this, she cycled through 9 distinct wigs, each crafted to reflect subtle shifts in Sara's mental and physical state. This was not just a cosmetic effort. It was a way to build the character's decline into the physical body, not just the script. Burstons' commitment made every twitch, glance, and line delivery land with more weight. When you see her stare blankly at the refrigerator or spin in circles under fluorescent lights, you are not watching effects. You are watching a performance constructed with hours of pain and precision. Number 11. Requiem for a Dream contains more than 2,000 individual cuts, a number that breaks from traditional editing rhythm. Darren Areronowski worked with editor Jay Rabinowitz to develop a frantic, stylized montage technique, sometimes referred to as hip-hop montage. It is not just fast cutting. It is the repetition of specific sequences, eyes widening, pupils dilating, drugs being prepared and consumed, each movement broken into multiple cuts to emphasize rhythm and routine. You see the same sequence again and again: syringe, flame, liquid, pulse, eyes, each time the same, each time slightly more desperate. The editing creates a physiological experience for the viewer. It mimics the disorientation of obsession and the narrowing focus of addiction. For Sara's amphetamine arc, the pace increases until the edits feel like they are skipping across her mind. The goal was not to simply keep energy high, it was to show what it feels like when time loses shape, when everything is spinning but going nowhere. The result is not just a visual style, it is an emotional engine that pulls the viewer deeper into collapse. Number 12. Darren Areronowski initially imagined Requiem for a Dream with a hip-hop soundtrack to reflect the streets of Brooklyn. It made sense in theory. The film was grounded in urban spaces and featured young characters hustling through broken systems and stolen dreams. But as the story deepened and the tone shifted towards something colder and more psychological, Aronofsky changed course. He reached out to composer Clint Mansell, who created a score built around repetition and decay. The main theme, Lux Eterna, starts with elegant strings but carries an overwhelming sense of dread. It feels less like music and more like time collapsing. The Kronos Quartet performed the soundtrack, using classical instruments to create something claustrophobic. The sound became inseparable from the film's identity, used later in trailers, commercials, and even other movies. The haunting score was not what Aronofsky first envisioned, but it became one of the most lasting aspects of the film's legacy. The strings do not just accompany the scenes, they suffocate them, making every fall feel final. Number 13. Requiem for a Dream received an NC-17 rating for its unflinching portrayal of drug use, sex work, and psychological breakdown. The rating was not given because of gore or jump scares. It was handed down because the film dared to look closely at suffering without blinking. That rating immediately limited its commercial release. Many theaters refused to show NC-17 films, and marketing became nearly impossible on mainstream platforms. Aronofsky refused to recut the movie for an R rating, even though trimming a few scenes could have made distribution easier. He believed that cutting the film to appease the rating system would dilute its emotional and artistic power. The controversy sparked conversations about censorship, particularly how American rating systems often target sexuality more harshly than violence. For some, the NC-17 label was a warning. For others, it became a mark of honesty. The rating turned the film into an underground sensation, watched through whispers and recommendations. In the end, the label could not contain it. The discomfort it caused became its reputation. Number 14. Darren Areronowski appears briefly on screen as a visitor in a drug dealer's gathering. His presence is so subtle that few viewers recognize it, but it is there, quietly anchoring his connection to the world he created. Aronofsky's cameo does not draw attention, does not invite applause, and does not feel like a director's ego at play. Instead, it feels like a silent handshake, an unspoken admission that he is part of the story's fabric. That scene unfolds around him, a room full of desperate faces, stale cigarette smoke, and tension that feels electric, and he moves among them, nearly invisible but undeniably present. The brief moment has no dialogue and no narrative weight, but it adds something essential. It reminds the viewer that even the storyteller walks through the world he portrays, that he feels the atmosphere of his creation firsthand. That kind of immersion, that kind of presence, resonates more than a credit ever could. It is quietly brave to insert oneself into that landscape, not to watch from above, but to stand among the unraveling, to feel it from the inside. Number 15. Requiem for a Dream received a long, emotional standing ovation when it premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, and the author Hubert Selby Jr. was moved to tears. The film's opening shook the audience, not with fireworks or spectacle, but with something more raw, honesty. 4 characters unravel, and spirals of hope turn to desperation, and the applause that followed did not sound celebratory, it sounded like grief. When Hubert Selby Jr., the voice behind the novel, wept in his seat, his tears conveyed what words could not, that the adaptation had honored the pain he had laid on the page. Cannes is a place where cinema and artifice often meet, but in that moment the audience faced something unvarnished. The reaction did not soften the film's brutality, it affirmed it. The applause did not cheer for triumph, it acknowledged heartbreak. The standing ovation echoed in the halls not as a reward, but as recognition. The grief and courage shown on screen were felt and returned, wave after wave, until the applause became part of the Requiem.